Through all forms of media, the sight of a swarm of fighters has always been a horrifyingly beautiful one. What first looks like easy prey in the form of a large lumbering ship quickly turns into a nightmare as the sky fills with combatants. Today, that nightmare has been brought to Star Citizen. We have arrived at Invictus 2953, and after much anticipation, the Mirai Fury and its variant the Fury MX have finally made it into the game. Is Star Citizen's very own TIE good enough to live up to its legendary silhouette, or are these snub fighters destined to gather dust in one of the many, many hangars it fits in? Hello folks, Space Tech here, and welcome to a ship review and buyer's guide of the Mirai Fury and the Fury MX. I will also be grounding this review by comparing all the little details to the most comparable snub ship, the P-72 Archimedes. I'll also be comparing it to the Arrow, since CIG explicitly mentions that the Fury is meant to compete with the Arrow and the Gladius. If you've been to my channel before, you know that I'm all about the numbers and statistics, so feel free to jump around to sections that interest you the most. Starting off with the tour, right off the bat you can see just how small the Fury is, which is super exciting. Of course, we must start with these massive thrusters. These thrusters can move in any direction, and I'll be going more in depth with the maneuverability that these thrusters provide in a minute. But the fact that your main thrusters can double as your retro thrusters to push you backwards or even strafe side to side speaks to how great this ship is going to fly. Moving along the right side, we have access to our first set of components, a size 1 shield generator and a size 1 cooler. Moving forward, we have the radar, as well as a label for the relay, which I believe will play into engineering gameplay down the line. Of course, this brings us to the wingtips, which are equipped with size 2 weapons by default on the base Fury and missiles on the Fury MX. Moving up the left side of the ship reveals access to avionics, followed by the life support and another size 1 cooler. This life support slot is empty right now, but I believe it will eventually be taken up by some sort of oxygen producer. I'm really excited to see that CIG is planning for all of these systems in advance, because it means that there will be less tech debt going down the line of ships that will require another polish to add space for the new engineering and life support systems later. Of course, like all other ships, you have access to 60,000 micro SCU. Not really usable for anything more than a little bit of armor or some weapons, but I think CIG largely put this in as a quality of life feature, and not necessarily because they expect you to use this craft away from its carrier that would usually be holding your weapons and armor anyway. This brings us to the back, where we have access to a size 1 power supply. In the very heart of this ship is the cockpit. Sitting here, you can fully appreciate that the design of this ship was done with careful attention paid to the pilot's visibility. This cockpit offers some of the best visibility available in any ship across the verse. To me, this really speaks to the role that this ship is meant to play today and in the future. Today is going to be great to use while zipping around a racetrack, and even better up in space as you're circling targets while laying into them with your 4 size 2s. Of course, this brings us to the only difference between the Fury and the Fury MX outside of the weapons. As if the windows on the cutter weren't enough torment for Carrack users who've been patiently awaiting their cockpit armor, the Fury MX also comes equipped with a blast shield that comes down over the front of the cockpit. Here, MISC seems to really borrow from other alien manufacturers, as the inside of the blast shield has displays that utilize the cameras on the exterior to give you a video feed that almost rivals the view that you get with the blast shield retracted. Finally, this brings us to what the Fury was born to do: deal out damage. The base variant of the ship is equipped with 4 size 2 laser repeaters at stock, outputting an awesome 1600 burst DPS with a capacitor size of 29. This is with a neutral power triangle. Moving the power triangle to weapons instead increases this capacity to 35. Of course, with this being a size 2 mount, you could equip gimbals and use size 1s instead. This would decrease your DPS by 16%, down to 1344 burst DPS. Compare this to the P-72 Archimedes, which has a burst DPS of 1344 since it's stuck to using those gimbaled size 1s. Finally, there is the Arrow, that can output 1472 DPS when outfitted with all gimbals. It does have the option, however, to up that to 1672 if you're willing to run the Arrow half-fixed size 3s with the size 1 weapons on the gimbal turret. The MX variant of the Fury comes with no pilot guns at all. Of course, that missing firepower has to be made up somewhere: missile loadouts. The base Fury comes with 4 size 2 missiles. Unlike the ones on most ships, these missile racks are bespoke to the Fury and cannot be changed to accommodate a greater number of size 1 missiles. The P-72 comes with 0 missiles. The Arrow comes with 6 size 2 missiles. These can be exchanged for 12 size 1 missiles. It also has the capacity to trade 4 size 2 missiles for 2 size 3s instead. Finally, this brings us to the Fury MX. This missile boat brings to bear an absolutely ridiculous 12 size 2 missiles with an additional 8 size 1s. Like the base Fury, the missile racks are bespoke to this variant of the Fury, and none of these can be exchanged for missiles of a different size. Overall, I think there is an obvious increase in firepower going from the P-72 to the Fury to a ship like the Arrow. Of course, the MX fulfills a completely different role altogether, being able to deliver a crazy amount of alpha damage, potentially crippling larger ships before they even knew what hit them. While the decrease in overall DPS isn't much on the Fury to go from the fixed to the gimbals, I think the natural maneuverability of the Fury makes the gimbals less valuable overall, since you're much more likely to be able to keep the target in your sights. Speaking of maneuverability, both the Arrow and especially the P-72 are well known for how easily they cut through the air and space, running circles around larger ships and less skilled pilots. So how does the Fury stack up? Both variants of the Furies produce much more thrust forward than the Arrow and slightly more than the P-72, but that's the only direction it's even close. The unique Xi'an thrusters on the Fury mean that it can produce just as much retro thrust, more than tripling what's available to the other ships. When it comes to maneuvering thrusters, the Fury decimates the Arrow and still handily beats the P-72. All of this put together mean that the Fury is going to be one of, if not the most maneuverable ship in Star Citizen. The maneuverability is hopefully going to translate to making the Fury a great racing ship to help shatter the current records and make them even faster, but I'll leave that up to the pros to figure out. What I can tell you is that this maneuverability, combined with its tiny size, is going to make hitting the Furies super difficult as they zip around other ships, including other light fighters. As expected, a ship this small and light really isn't going to enjoy getting hit, and this is obvious when you take a look at its durability. All 4 ships have room for a size 1 shield, which should all be upgraded to the top level shields that have a total of 1,725 HP. With regards to hull durability, the Fury has around 6,600 total HP, with 1,500 of that being the critical body HP. The P-72 has around 3,000 total HP, with 1,250 of that being body HP. Finally, the Arrow is much more durable, with 9,280 HP total, 2,300 of which is for the nose, and another 2,300 for the body. Clearly, the Arrow is much better at taking a beating and continuing to fly. That being said, the Fury isn't made of paper and so can take a couple hits. So long as you can manage your shields well, this snub fighter is not one to underestimate in a fight, especially if it's bot friends. This brings us to the unique selling point of the Fury, its size. From just the recent Inside Star Citizen episode, we have seen that you can fit at least 1 in a Constellation and the Valkyrie, 3 in the top hangar of a Carrack, and a few more in a Caterpillar. But how many Furies can you fit into a C2? For my testing, as well as examples that I've seen around the verse so far, it looks as though you can comfortably fit 13 Furies inside of C2. I have tried to fit a couple more, and you can fit up to 15, but at that point you are risking severe damage to the inside of your ship from bumping around. That is an absolutely ridiculous number, and likely far more than anyone would reasonably be able to crew, but it doesn't make it any less cool. Of course, I will be testing the Fury more with a wide variety of ships to see how many will fit into an 890, a Corsair, and many, many more, so subscribe if you don't want to miss that one. Another exciting reveal from yesterday's Inside Star Citizen is the fact that these 2 variants are going to be the first of many. I love the idea of more value being brought to the snub ships outside of combat, and can easily envision another variant meant for racing. There's plenty of opportunity to expand the scope of this platform with future gameplay as well, including a stealth variant or a scout variant with a large radar. What variant would you be most excited to see? So great looks, good damage, amazing maneuverability, and okay durability should make for a relatively easy recommendation. Unfortunately, I do think that the role of snub ships as a whole in today's version of Star Citizen is just a little bit lacking. Without the ability to at least spline jump around a planet or moon, you are extremely tethered to the mothercraft. If that's the case, you do have to ask yourself what you are giving up by also carrying a Fury on board. If the Fury is meant for a member of your crew to use, would they have been better served by bringing their own fighter instead? Of course, these questions are asked in the context of only having the system as Stanton. Once Pyro comes into the game, it will be a lot harder to bring light fighters around, and you will thank yourself for remembering to bring your Fury for sure. That's not to say you shouldn't get the Fury today if you enjoy it, just that there will be plenty of opportunities to purchase it in-game for what I'm sure will be a very cheap price in in-game currency. All in all though, the ship is fantastic and definitely lives up to the silhouette. Please like and or subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and tell me what ship are you going to use to carry a Fury. Take care and see you in the next one.